Marcus Chen had always been good at taking hits. Growing up on the streets of New Shanghai, he learned early that sometimes the best way to protect someone was to put yourself between them and danger. He never imagined this skill would one day save an alien princess and change the fate of two civilizations. The day everything changed started like any other aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge. Marcus served as a security officer for the human delegation, tasked with protecting Ambassador Sarah Wellington during the most important peace negotiations in galactic history. The Zephyrian Empire, with their crystalline ships and energy-based technology, had agreed to meet humanity for the first time after decades of border skirmishes. Princess Lyralai of the Zephyrian royal bloodline was nothing like the monsters human propaganda had painted. Standing 7 feet tall with iridescent blue skin that shifted like liquid mercury, she possessed an otherworldly beauty that made even hardened soldiers pause. Her large, violet eyes held an intelligence that seemed to peer into one's soul, and when she spoke, her voice carried musical tones that resonated in frequencies humans could barely perceive. Marcus first noticed something was wrong during the third day of negotiations. The princess had been advocating for peace with a passion that surprised the human delegation. Her own people, however, seemed less enthusiastic. He caught subtle glances between Zephyrian military officials, the way their scaled hands moved to their energy weapons when they thought no one was looking. The attack came during what should have been a ceremonial dinner. Ambassador Wellington was presenting a traditional human peace offering when the lights suddenly dimmed to emergency red. Zephyrian soldiers burst through the chamber doors, their plasma rifles charging with an ominous whine. "Traitor!" General Zerath, the princess's own military advisor, snarled as he aimed his weapon directly at Lyralai. "You would sell our empire to these soft-skinned mammals!" Marcus didn't think. 20 years of street fighting and military training kicked in as he launched himself across the room. The first plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around, but he kept moving. The second hit his chest, burning through his diplomatic jacket and searing his flesh. The third would have killed him if he hadn't reached the princess by then. He wrapped his arms around Lyralai, feeling the strange coolness of her skin as he pulled her behind an overturned table. Plasma bolts rained down around them, each one Marcus intercepted with his own body. Her people were trying to kill her, and she was looking at him with those violet eyes filled with confusion and something that might have been gratitude. "Why?" she whispered in accented English, her voice carrying harmonics that made his bones vibrate. "You barely know me." Marcus grimaced as another bolt grazed his leg. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply, reloading his kinetic pistol. Human weapons seemed primitive compared to Zephyrian technology, but they got the job done. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When the smoke cleared, half the Zephyrian delegation lay dead, along with 2 human security officers. General Zerath and his conspirators had been eliminated, but at a terrible cost. The peace talks were in ruins, trust shattered like glass on the chamber floor. Princess Lyralai knelt beside Marcus as the medical teams worked frantically to stabilize him. His body bore 17 separate plasma burns, any one of which should have been fatal. Human physiology, it seemed, was more resilient than Zephyrian science had calculated. "I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid," she said, her hand hovering just above his wounded chest. Zephyrian touch could be lethal to humans, but the gesture spoke volumes. "My people will not accept this failure quietly." She was right. Within hours, the Zephyrian fleet had surrounded the human ships. The surviving military commanders demanded the immediate execution of all humans aboard, claiming they had orchestrated the attack to eliminate Zephyrian leadership. It didn't matter that human weapons couldn't penetrate Zephyrian shields, or that the attack had clearly come from within. Fear and prejudice needed a scapegoat. Ambassador Wellington tried desperately to salvage the situation, but it was hopeless. The Zephyrians had closed ranks, presenting a united front of outrage and suspicion. Even Princess Liralai seemed powerless to stop the momentum toward war. That's when everything changed again. The communication came directly to the flagship, bypassing all normal diplomatic channels. It was addressed specifically to Princess Liralai, and when she opened it, her entire body went rigid with what could only be described as terror. "What is it?" Ambassador Wellington asked, noting the princess's reaction. Liralai's voice was barely a whisper when she replied. "My grandmother has heard what happened here. She is coming." The human delegation had heard whispers of the Zephyrian matriarch during their briefings, but always in hushed tones that suggested speaking her name too loudly might summon something terrible. Queen Valara, the Empress Dowager, had ruled the Zephyrian Empire for over 3 centuries. She was ancient even by Zephyrian standards, and legends claimed she had personally commanded fleets that turned entire star systems to ash. "How long do we have?" Wellington asked. "She will arrive tomorrow," Liralai replied, her skin shifting to deeper shades of blue that Marcus's medical readings indicated meant extreme stress. "And when she does, she will demand answers. Real answers." Marcus, propped up in the medical bay despite his doctor's protests, felt a chill that had nothing to do with his injuries. "What kind of answers?" The princess looked at him with those violet eyes, and he saw something in them that made his blood run cold. Not fear for herself, but fear for him. "She will have heard that a human threw himself repeatedly into plasma fire to save my life. My grandmother is curious about such things. She will want to meet this human who values honor above his own survival." The way she said it made it clear that meeting the Queen Dowager was not typically a survivable experience. Ambassador Wellington began immediate preparations for evacuation, but the Zephyrian fleet had them completely surrounded. There was no escape, no reinforcements coming, no way out except through whatever trial awaited them when the legendary queen arrived. Marcus spent the night staring out the medical bay's viewport at the stars, wondering if he would live to see another sunrise. He had acted on instinct, doing what felt right in the moment. Now it seemed that simple act of protection had set in motion events that could determine whether humanity survived its first real contact with an alien civilization. Princess Liralai visited him near dawn, moving through the corridors like liquid shadow. She stood at the foot of his bed for a long time without speaking, her skin cycling through colors he was beginning to recognize as emotional states. "I could tell her you died," she finally said. "From your injuries. It would not be entirely false. By all rights, you should have died." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "But you won't." "No," she admitted. "I won't. My people value honor above all else, and lying about such a debt would dishonor us both. But I fear what she will do to you. My grandmother sees the universe differently than younger generations. To her, strength is the only truth that matters." "Then we'll have to hope she sees strength in doing the right thing, even when it's stupid," Marcus replied, managing a weak smile despite the pain coursing through his body. The next morning brought with it a ship unlike anything in human records. Queen Valara's flagship emerged from hyperspace like a living creature, its biomechanical hull pulsing with internal light. It was easily 10 Queen Valara's presence filled the medical bay like a physical weight pressing down on everything and everyone. Marcus felt his heart rate spike on the monitors as those white star-like eyes studied him with the intensity of a scientific instrument. Ambassador Wellington stood frozen in the corner, barely breathing, while Princess Liralai watched with barely concealed anxiety. "Answer me truthfully, human," the Queen said, her voice carrying undertones that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his bones. "Why did you choose to die for my granddaughter?" Marcus had prepared for this moment all night, running through diplomatic answers and careful explanations. But looking up at this ancient creature who radiated power like a miniature sun, he realized that anything less than complete honesty would be both insulting and probably fatal. "I didn't choose to die," he said simply. "I chose to protect someone who was trying to prevent a war. Seemed like the right thing to do." The Queen's head tilted with predatory grace. "The right thing. Explain this concept to me, human. In my experience, most species do what benefits them most." "Maybe that's the problem," Marcus replied, ignoring Ambassador Wellington's sharp intake of breath. "Maybe that's why the galaxy's been fighting for so long. Someone has to be willing to take hits for others, or nobody trusts anybody." Queen Valara moved closer, and Marcus could feel the electromagnetic field that surrounded her like a second skin. It made his metal implants itch and his fillings ache. "You speak as if honor is a choice rather than an evolutionary trait. Your species fascinates me, human Marcus Chen." The fact that she knew his name sent chills down his spine. She had done her research. "Your kind is weak," she continued, beginning to circle his bed like a shark around wounded prey. "Your bones break easily. Your skin tears like paper. Your lifespans are laughably short. By any reasonable measure, you should have been extinct long before you achieved spaceflight." "And yet," Princess Lyralai interjected carefully, "they survived and prospered." "Yes," the Queen agreed, her white eyes never leaving Marcus. "They did, which suggests that your weakness might actually be a form of strength that we do not understand." Marcus forced himself to meet her gaze. "Maybe it's not about being the strongest or the smartest. Maybe it's about being willing to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself." "Sacrifice." Queen Valara repeated the word like she was tasting something foreign. "Show me your scars, human." Marcus hesitated, then slowly pulled back the medical blanket. His chest and arms were covered in healing plasma burns, ugly purple welts that would mark him permanently. The Queen studied them with professional interest, as if reading a map written in scar tissue. 17 direct hits, she observed, each one potentially fatal. Yet you continued to interpose yourself between the weapons and my granddaughter. Why did you not seek cover? Why did you not retreat?" "Because she would have died," Marcus said, "and with her any chance for peace." The Queen's skin patterns shifted, colors flowing like liquid mercury across her massive frame. Marcus was beginning to recognize this as deep thought in Zephyrian physiology. "Peace," she said finally. "Another concept that your species seems to value above survival. Most curious." She turned to her granddaughter. "Lyralai, you have spent time with these humans. What else have you observed about their nature?" Princess Lyralai straightened, choosing her words carefully. "They are collaborative, grandmother. Where we compete for dominance, they share resources. Where we establish hierarchy through strength, they create systems based on mutual benefit. It should not work, and yet their civilization spans hundreds of worlds." "Inefficient," Queen Valara pronounced. "Illogical. Weak." "And yet," Lyralai pressed gently, "they created technologies we had not imagined. Their medical science allowed them to heal injuries that would have killed any Zephyrian. Their engineering produces ships that, while less powerful than ours, can be manufactured and maintained by ordinary citizens rather than the specialized castes." The Queen considered this, her white eyes reflecting thoughts that moved too fast for human comprehension. "You suggest that their apparent weakness masks hidden strengths." "I suggest that we have been measuring strength incorrectly," Lyralai replied boldly. "This human took plasma fire meant for me not because he was strong enough to survive it, but because he was willing to die for principles larger than himself. That kind of strength cannot be measured in weapons or shields." Marcus watched this exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't just about him, or even about the failed peace talks. This was a fundamental clash between two completely different ways of understanding the universe. The Zephyrians had built their empire on individual power and hierarchical dominance. Humans had built their civilization on cooperation and shared sacrifice. "Tell me, human," Queen Valara said suddenly, turning back to him. "If I were to release your ships and allow you to return to your territory, what would you do with this knowledge of us?" The question was a trap, and Marcus knew it. The wrong answer would doom not just him, but potentially all of humanity. "I'd tell them that the Zephyrians are not monsters," he said carefully. "That Princess Lyrelei risked everything to try for peace, and that even when her own people tried to kill her, she still believed it was possible. And if I were to demand reparations for the death of my military officers, if I were to require tribute or territorial concessions—" Marcus met her eyes steadily. "Then I'd tell them that too. But I'd also tell them that a queen who travels across space to personally investigate an act of honor might be someone worth negotiating with." For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across the queen's alien features. "Clever. You seek to flatter me into mercy." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I'm telling you what I observed. You could have ordered our ships destroyed from a distance. Instead, you came in person to understand what happened. That suggests you value truth over convenience." The medical bay fell silent except for the steady beeping of monitors and the subtle hum of life support systems. Queen Valara stood motionless for so long that Marcus began to wonder if she had entered some kind of Zephyrian trance state. When she finally moved, it was with explosive speed. One moment she was standing beside his bed, the next she was across the room, her massive form blocking the exit. Ambassador Wellington squeaked in terror, but the Queen ignored her entirely. "Lyrelei," she said without turning around, "explain to me why this human's actions have created such chaos in my military commands." The princess took a deep breath. "Because they cannot understand it, grandmother. Our warriors train their entire lives to achieve personal glory in battle. The concept of deliberately taking damage to protect someone weaker than yourself contradicts everything they believe about how the universe works. And you? What do you believe?" "I believe that Marcus Chen showed me something I had never seen before. Strength that comes not from power over others, but from willingness to sacrifice for others. It makes me wonder what else we might learn from humanity if we stopped seeing them as enemies." The Queen's skin patterns shifted again, this time to deep purples and golds that Marcus couldn't interpret. When she turned back to face him, her expression was unreadable. "You present me with a dilemma, human Marcus Chen. By rights, I should have you executed as an enemy combatant who caused the death of Zephyrian officers. Yet my granddaughter insists that you acted with honor, and that honor demands I acknowledge the debt she owes you. Grandmother," Princess Lyrelei said carefully, "there is precedent in the old codes." Queen Valara's white eyes sharpened. "Explain. The ritual of claiming. When a warrior saves the life of royalty, tradition allows for that warrior to be claimed into royal service. Their loyalty transfers from their original people to the crown they protected." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. He had saved the princess, but apparently that came with strings attached that nobody had mentioned. "You would have me claim a human as my personal guard?" the Queen asked, her voice carrying dangerous undertones. "I would have you consider that Marcus Chen has already proven his worth in the most direct way possible," Lyrelei replied, "and that having a human advisor might provide insights into how to deal with their expanding civilization." The Queen moved back to Marcus's bedside, studying him with renewed interest. "This ritual would require you to swear absolute loyalty to the Zephyrian crown, human. You would become, in effect, a Sioux Queen." Valara's laugh was like crystalline chimes in a hurricane, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. You wish to negotiate with me, human? You, who lie broken in a medical bed surrounded by my fleet? Marcus forced himself to sit up straighter despite the pain shooting through his plasma-burned chest. You said honor transcends species barriers. If that's true, then you'll understand that I have responsibilities to my own people that I can't just abandon. The Queen's white eyes glittered with what might have been respect. State your terms, Marcus Chen. Amuse me with your audacity. First, Ambassador Wellington and the human delegation get safe passage home. No hostages, no political prisoners. They had nothing to do with the attack, and they deserve to report what really happened here. Princess Lyrelay nodded approvingly, but her grandmother's expression remained unreadable. Second, I want regular communication with human space. If I'm going to serve as some kind of bridge between our people, I need to understand what's happening on both sides. Reasonable, Queen Valara acknowledged. And your third demand? Marcus took a deep breath. If this claiming ritual works, if having a human advisor actually helps you understand my species better, then I want your promise that you'll seriously consider formal peace negotiations. Not just a ceasefire, but actual cooperation between our civilizations. The medical bay fell silent, except for the distant thrum of the Queen's massive flagship's engines. Marcus could feel his heart hammering against his ribs as those ancient white eyes studied him with predatory intensity. You ask me to risk the security of an empire that has existed for over 2 millennia, she said finally, based on the unproven theory that your species' weakness might actually be a form of strength. I'm asking you to consider that maybe strength isn't about who can hurt who the most, Marcus replied. Maybe it's about who can build something worth protecting. Queen Valara moved closer, and Marcus could smell something like ozone and starlight radiating from her massive form. You realize that if you fail, if this experiment proves that humans are simply clever prey animals, I will have no choice but to treat your entire species accordingly? Marcus met her gaze steadily. And you realize that if it succeeds, you'll have to admit that your empire's entire understanding of power and hierarchy might need some adjustment? For a moment, Marcus thought he had pushed too far. The Queen's skin patterns shifted to deep crimsons and blacks that made Princess Lyrelay step back in alarm. Then, abruptly, Queen Valara began to laugh again, that crystalline sound that made the metal walls vibrate. "Oh, you fascinating little creature," she said, her voice carrying harmonic undertones of genuine amusement. "Very well. I accept your terms, but understand this, Marcus Chen. The ritual of claiming is not merely a political arrangement. It is a binding that will change you in ways your species has never experienced." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. "Zephyrian royal guards undergo biological modifications," Princess Lyrelay explained quietly. "Enhanced reflexes, improved durability, extended lifespan. The process is intense. It kills roughly 30% of Zephyrian candidates," Queen Valara added helpfully. "The mortality rate for humans is entirely theoretical, since none have ever attempted it." Marcus felt his mouth go dry. "And if I survive?" "Then you become something new," the Queen said. "No longer entirely human, but not Zephyrian either. A bridge between worlds, as you put it. Are you prepared for such a transformation?" Marcus thought about the 17 plasma burns covering his body, about the way he had thrown himself repeatedly into lethal fire to protect someone he barely knew. Maybe he had been transforming all along, and this was just making it official. "When do we start?" he asked. The process began immediately. Queen Valara's medical specialists, beings that looked like they had stepped out of humanity's deepest nightmares, worked with an efficiency that was both impressive and terrifying. Marcus was transferred to the Queen's flagship, where medical technology that bordered on magic began repairing damage to his body while simultaneously rewriting his genetic code. The pain was indescribable. For 3 days, Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness as alien nanomachines rewrote his nervous system and reinforced his skeletal structure. His muscles were enhanced with synthetic fibers that could withstand plasma impacts, while his reflexes were accelerated to Zephyrian standards. But the physical changes were nothing compared to the psychological integration. As part of the claiming ritual, Marcus was connected to the Zephyrian military neural network, a vast web of shared consciousness that linked every royal guard to their queen. For the first time in his life, he could feel other minds brushing against his own, alien thoughts that moved like quicksilver through concepts his human brain struggled to process. On the 4th day, Marcus woke up different. He could see across broader spectrums of light, hear frequencies that had been beyond human perception, feel electromagnetic fields as clearly as touch. When he moved, his body responded with fluid grace that defied his previous limitations. Most disturbing of all, he could sense Queen Valara's presence like a distant star, a constant awareness that she existed somewhere in the vast ship around him. "How do you feel?" Princess Lyrelay asked, when he finally sat up on the biomechanical table that had served as his cocoon. Marcus tested his new strength by flexing his fingers, watching muscles move with mechanical precision. "Like I'm not entirely myself anymore," he admitted. "You are not," Queen Valara said, entering the medical chamber with her usual dramatic flair. "You are something new. The first human to undergo Zephyrian enhancement, the first alien to serve in my personal guard, the first living bridge between our peoples." She gestured, and a mirror slid down from the ceiling. Marcus stared at his reflection in shock. He was still recognizably human, but the changes were obvious. His skin had taken on a faint iridescent quality, similar to Zephyrian physiology, but distinctly different. His eyes had changed too, pupils dilated to gather more light, irises shot through with golden threads that seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. "The question now," the Queen continued, "is whether this transformation was worth the cost." Over the following weeks, Marcus learned just how profound that cost had been. He could no longer eat normal human food. His enhanced metabolism required Zephyrian nutrient compounds. His sleep cycles had shifted to match the longer Zephyrian day-night rotation. Most isolating of all, he could feel the neural network connecting him to alien minds, thoughts and emotions that weren't his own bleeding through the connection. But he also discovered new capabilities that made him uniquely valuable. His human intuition, enhanced by Zephyrian processing speed, allowed him to analyze situations from multiple perspectives simultaneously. He could understand both human and Zephyrian psychology, serving as a true interpreter between the species. His first real test came when a human merchant vessel strayed into Zephyrian territory. The ship's captain, desperate to reach a medical station before his daughter died of a rare disease, had violated the border, hoping to shave days off his journey. Zephyrian patrol ships intercepted him, and by military protocol, the penalty for territorial violation was immediate destruction. Marcus felt the order forming in Queen Valara's mind through their neural link before she spoke it. He also felt something else, curiosity about how her new human advisor would handle this situation. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "I request permission to negotiate with the human vessel." "For what purpose?" she asked, though he could sense through their connection that she already knew. "To demonstrate that mercy can be a form of strength," Marcus replied. "That ship represents everything humans value: family, sacrifice, hope. Destroying it would prove that Zephyrians are exactly the monsters human propaganda claims. Saving it would prove that your empire is strong enough to show mercy." The Queen considered this for a long moment, her white eyes reflecting calculations too complex for even his enhanced mind to follow. "Very well," Handle this situation, Marcus Chen. Show me how a human would solve a Zephyrian problem. The negotiation took 6 hours. Marcus spoke with the merchant captain, learning about his daughter's condition and his desperate journey. He consulted with Zephyrian medical specialists about possible treatments. He researched trade routes and diplomatic protocols. And slowly, carefully, he crafted a solution that satisfied both human compassion and Zephyrian honor. The merchant vessel was escorted to the nearest Zephyrian medical station, where their advanced technology saved the dying child in minutes. In return, the captain agreed to serve as an unofficial ambassador, carrying messages between human and Zephyrian territories. A single act of mercy became the foundation for a new communication channel between the species. Queen Valara watched the entire process with growing interest. When it was over, she summoned Marcus to her private chambers, a space that defied human understanding of physics and geometry. "You have surprised me," she said without preamble. "I expected you to argue for human interests. Instead, you found a solution that served both our peoples." Marcus bowed in the formal Zephyrian style, a gesture that felt natural despite his human origins. "That was the point of this experiment, wasn't it? To see if someone could truly serve both sides." "Indeed. And having observed your methods, I find myself curious about this human concept of cooperation." The Queen paused, her skin patterns shifting through colors that indicated deep contemplation. "Tell me, Marcus Chen, do you believe it would be possible to expand this approach? To create formal diplomatic channels between our empires?" Marcus felt his heart race, the enhanced organ pumping alien-modified blood through his hybrid circulatory system. "I think it's not only possible, Your Majesty, but inevitable. Our peoples are going to keep running into each other as we both expand across the galaxy. We can either learn to work together, or we can destroy each other. I'd prefer the first option." "As would I," Queen Valara admitted. "Which is why I'm assigning you a new mission, my hybrid guardian. You will return to human space as my personal representative, carrying an offer of formal negotiations. Princess Lyrale will accompany you as proof of my sincerity." Marcus stared at her in shock. "You're sending me home?" "I am sending you to build a bridge," the Queen corrected. "You are still claimed to my service, still bound by the neural network that connects all royal guards. You will forever be both human and Zephyrian, belonging fully to neither people and therefore uniquely qualified to serve both." 3 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of a joint human-Zephyrian diplomatic vessel, watching as the first formal peace treaty between their species was signed in the space between two star systems. His body bore the permanent marks of both civilizations, human scars from plasma fire and Zephyrian modifications that had saved his life and changed his nature forever. Princess Lyrale joined him at the viewing port, her violet eyes reflecting the light of nearby stars. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Everything you gave up to be here?" Marcus considered the question carefully. He could never go back to being fully human. His enhanced senses would always set him apart. His neural connection to the Zephyrian Royal Guard would always be part of his consciousness. He had sacrificed his original identity to become something new and uncertain. But watching human and Zephyrian diplomats working together, seeing technology and knowledge being shared instead of weapons being fired, he knew he had made the right choice. "I took every blow to protect you," he said finally, "and in return, you helped me protect something even bigger. How could I regret that?" In the years that followed, Marcus became a legend in both civilizations. The human who bled for honor, the alien queen's chosen guardian, the living symbol of what cooperation could achieve. His name was spoken in the same breath as the greatest heroes of both species, not because he had conquered enemies, but because he had chosen to take damage so others could build something better. And sometimes, late at night in the hybrid quarters aboard diplomatic vessels, he would look at his scarred hands and his hybrid reflection and smile. He had learned to take hits as a child on the streets of New Shanghai. But it had taken an alien princess and a terrifying queen to teach him that sometimes the most important thing you could protect was the possibility of peace itself. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of opportunities for those brave enough to sacrifice for something larger than themselves. Marcus Chen had thrown himself into plasma fire to save one life, and in doing so, had helped save two civilizations from destroying each other. It was, he thought, a pretty good trade. Object of my empire, rather than a citizen of your own people. Marcus looked from the Queen to Princess Lirelei, understanding dawning on him slowly. This was more than just a way to save his life. This was a potential bridge between two civilizations, a living symbol of the cooperation that might be possible. What would happen to the rest of my people? He asked. That would depend entirely on how well you serve, Queen Valara replied. A successful claiming would demonstrate that humans possess honor that transcends species barriers. Such a demonstration might lead to opportunities for further cooperation. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of decision crushing down on him. Accept, and he would become a prisoner of alien politics, cut off from everything he had ever known. Refuse, and he would likely doom any chance of peace between their peoples. When he opened his eyes, both Queen and Princess were watching him intently. If I accept this claiming, he said slowly, I want to negotiate terms. As the size of the largest human vessel, and when it moved, space itself seemed to bend around it. The Queen's shuttle docked with elegant precision, and Marcus felt the atmospheric pressure change as something far more than human stepped aboard their ship. Even lying in the medical bay, he could sense a presence that made his primitive human nervous system scream warnings about apex predators and ancient dangers. When Queen Valara finally entered the medical bay, Marcus understood why entire civilizations had surrendered rather than face her in battle. She was larger than her granddaughter, standing nearly 8 feet tall, and her skin was the deep blue-black of deep space, shot through with veins of silver that pulsed with her heartbeat. Her eyes were not violet, but pure white, like stars reflected in still water. She studied him in silence for what felt like hours, her alien features impossible to read. When she finally spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the metal walls of the ship vibrate. So, she said in perfect, unaccented English, you are the human who bleeds for honor.